Everyone, we're at the top of the hour now. I do see that we have some people still signing in, so we're going to give it just a couple more minutes. While they're signing in, I'm going to give us a quick introduction. Um, my name is Chad Butler. I work with GBS Retire. Throughout the presentation today, we're going to have participants muted as there is a lot of attendees. But if you have any questions, you can send those into my email address there in the bottom right, chad.butler@gbsretire. And if time permitting, have time at the end, we'll do our best to get those answered. If not, Rocky and I, my colleague that's going to be presenting today, will get back to you via email or phone. So without further ado, I want to introduce my colleague, Rocky Pratt. Rocky's been with GBS Retire now for longer than me. He is a certified financial planner. Between the two of us, it is always our goal to assist as many people as possible with their finances and retirement planning. So this is part of the series that we're running to make sure that we're out there providing as much education as we can and answering questions. So without further ado, I'm going to have Rocky take over. But again, you know, if you're on the call, you may not think that you have a question and one may come up. So, you know, take a picture or write that email address down. We'll show it again at the end of the presentation in case you want to follow up afterward. But thank you so much for joining. And Rocky, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. Yep, we're excited to be having these monthly webinars going forward. We hope it'll be a good value add to you as employees, as participants within GBS clientele. So we're excited for this, and thank you, Chad, for that great introduction. Quick intro. Yes, my name is Rocky. I know some of you are thinking of it. No, it's not named after Rocky Balboa. Would have been cool, but no, just Rocky. Been doing this, yeah, for a number of years now, about 40 years. So I enjoy these group meetings, getting to know individuals on a personal level as well. So at the end, we'll make sure, like Chad said, that you have our contact information. You're able to reach out if you have questions. And we're also able to schedule one-on-one consultations to go over your personal situation. We're happy to do that, to be a resource for you. This presentation in particular, Financial Wellness 101, is one of my favorites. It's a good one because it applies to everyone, right? Some of you may be at different points along your journey towards financial success, whatever that means for you, whether that's retirement, something else. We're all at different stages, different parts of the journey there. And this presentation, the stuff that we are going to go through today, is going to apply to every one of us. So it's always good to take a step back, so to speak, and look at our financial foundation to make sure that we're building, I'll use the term, our financial tower throughout this presentation, to make sure we're building that on a solid foundation. So regardless of where you are, I encourage you all to kind of look back towards your financial foundation as we go through this to make sure you're building on a solid foundation so that you can achieve that financial success, whatever that means to you. So again, send any emails or send any questions to Chad there, that email. If you want to write it down, now is a good time to do so before we dive into the meat of the presentation today. What we're going to go through today is not anything crazy, right? We're not going to go into detail about different, investing strategies, different saving strategies. We're not going to be talking about cryptocurrency today. But if you have questions about that, we can talk about that offline. What we'll go through today is going to be kind of a high-level overview of specifically money, specifically how money has nothing to do with money. I'll get to that here in a minute. Budgeting. You may have created a budget previously and struggled to be consistent with that budget. I've been there personally myself, so we'll go through that, some tips to be successful within your budget. I want to touch a little bit on credit and debt as well. Debt is one of the number one stressors within our finances today, so I want to touch on that. And then hopefully leave you with some tips throughout this presentation just to help you create that financial momentum. So starting off there with how money has nothing to do with money. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that money is not about math or the numbers, right? We can run the calculations all day that if you save X percent for X amount of years and get X percent return, you're going to be fine. But it's not about the money numbers, because we already know those numbers. But sometimes the hardest part is having our behavior, having our habits align with those goals and priorities, right? Our financial life, or our financial health, so to speak, will be good or bad not necessarily on how much money we make, but on the decisions and the choices that we make with that money. Right? We've all seen those examples on TV where we have celebrities, athletes, actors that make millions and millions and millions of dollars a year. And then a few years later, we're finding out they're declaring bankruptcy, right? Well, what happened? They had millions and millions and millions of dollars a year, and yet they still weren't able to have their financial life in order, so to speak. A good example of that I like to use is MC Hammer. MC Hammer was one who had a net worth north of $70 million. And for most of us, right, if I had $70 million, right, my life would be a lot different and I probably wouldn't need to work all that much. But MC Hammer, a couple of years later, was declaring bankruptcy. He spent a good chunk of that, probably $20 million, building a home. If you've seen his home, it's a concrete home with marble floors. It's stunning. I encourage you to go look it up on YouTube and get a tour of it. They do have those tours on YouTube that you can see. But his behavior did not align with his financial priorities, right? Whether he knew it or not at the time. On the flip side of that, we also have those examples of people who didn't make very much. There was this one example of a gentleman who didn't make more than $50,000 a year throughout his career. And he was able to retire on time, a multimillionaire. It's not about how much you make. It's about what we do with the money that we do make, trying to align our behaviors and our habits with our number one financial priorities. So I encourage you to think about that. Think to yourself, maybe write it down. What is your number one financial priority today? For each one of us, it's going to be different, right? Your financial priority may be to, save for a down payment on a house, or maybe you already have a home and your priority is to pay off debt. Maybe you're paying for a wedding, children's education, or maybe, you're further along in your career and your number one financial priority at this point is retirement. Every one of us will have a different financial priority or different thought behind what our number one financial priority is. But think about that. What is it for you? Now think about what percentage of your monthly budget, so how much are you saving towards that goal each month? It could be $100, $50, maybe 2%, 10% of your income. Think about what that number is probably, maybe an estimate today. Our experience, and again, it's gonna vary, but our experience is on average, only about 3% of individuals' income is going towards their number one financial priority. That's not a lot. And if we're not saving enough, if our habits are not helping us accomplish these financial priorities, what does that cause? Stress, frustration, discouragement, and that makes it even harder to build that financial momentum as you go throughout your life. So, if our habits don't support our financial priorities, goals, and desires, we're never going to be stress-free. So that's kind of the first thing. And the first priority within financial wellness is making sure that our behavior and our habits align with our financial priorities, which honestly, sometimes that's the hardest part. And once we get that, once we start to improve that 1% at a time, then everything else falls into place. It sounds easy, and a lot of this stuff sounds very easy on paper, but when it comes to actually implementing it, that's where it gets difficult. Let's talk resources real quick, particularly one of my favorite resources, toilet paper. Let's imagine you go into a bathroom and you see a full roll of toilet paper. It's Charmin Ultra Soft or Strong, whatever is your favorite, right? You can go crazy. You can go 5, 10, 15 ply deep, right? Because you can. You're not afraid of running out. Let's think on the flip side, you go into the bathroom and you can see the cardboard through the paper. You're instantly going to act differently because we make different different decisions based on the resources we're presented with. We are more resourceful with less resources, and when we have more resources presented to us, we often make bad decisions, right? Which research does show this. There are research studies that show that we make our worst decisions on payday, right as we're paid, right as we have the most in our accounts that we're used to, and our best decisions the day before payday. Right, so we make our worst decisions when there's the least amount in our accounts. Then we make the worst decisions when we have the most in our account. Right, it's all about behavior and trying to shift our behavior to be in line with our financial priorities. One example, some homework for you to take away, is to count how many times you spend. So maybe over the next 7 days, count how many times you are spending on everyday things, whether that's buying gas, groceries, eating out, utilities, all that stuff. Count how many times you are spending over the next 7 days, right? There was a recent study that showed on average people spend about 22 times per week. And what it also showed is that the more people spend, so the more times you're swiping your card, the less you care about the cost of those purchases. Now, the proper amount to spend, and I'm not going to assume any numbers here, but they say around 10 to 15 times a week. It's going to be different for everybody depending on size of your family, your situation. But try and count how many times you're spending over the next 7 days. What that'll do is that'll start to help you align your behavior and your habits with your financial priorities, because you'll start to see, is this purchase really in line with my financial goals, right? And the point of that is not to remove any fun expenses or any frivolous expenses, right? As long as it's built into the budget, as long as it's in control, that can still help you get to your financial priorities. So I encourage you to do that over the next 7 days. Count how many times you're spending, what you're spending it on, and the cost of those purchases. I have a quick quiz question here. Let's see if I can get this up here. All right, so we're going to launch this here. What do you think is the percent of people that have clear financial goals for the next 5 years? Just that first question there. You think it's 17%, 26%, 44%, 62%? Getting some answers in here for A and B. I was actually kind of surprised when I saw this study here. The actual answer is D. 62%, according to this study, have clear financial goals for the next 5 years, which is great. And it showed Gen Z as well. So this was particularly a millennial study. Gen Z only had about 54%. So they had clear financial goals. So it showed us that as people get closer throughout their career, have a little bit more idea of what they want, what's possible, they get clear financial goals for what they want. But this number here, this 62% should really be 100%. Every one of us should have clear financial goals for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, 15 years, so on and so forth. So this is the second homework I would assign, so to speak, for you to do over the next month. Document your goals. Get really clear about what you want over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 plus years. And I would encourage you to try and make these emotional. As an example, I use this one a lot because a lot of people nowadays are starting to save for a down payment, particularly in this current housing market. That can be difficult. But having this as more of a midterm goal it helps so you don't rush in to buying a home, but make that emotional. Not just save for a down payment, save for X amount, right? Have a dollar amount, whether that's 50, 100,000, however much that is, for a down payment on a house that's in this neighborhood, that has this many bedrooms, that has this amount of yard, right, for the dog to run around in, right? Try and make those goals emotional. And what that'll do is that'll help keep you motivated. Particularly, I'll touch on that when we get to budgeting. If your goals aren't motivating, if they aren't emotional, drawing you to help your behaviors align with your financial priorities, it's going to be very difficult to be consistent. And at least for me, that's why it was hard previously to stay consistent with the budget, because our goals just weren't motivating enough. So whatever your goals are, I would encourage you to write them down. Be very specific, make them emotional so that you are motivated to maybe change some. You don't have to change all of your current habits and behaviors, but change some of those to align with those financial priorities. The first one here I'm going to highlight is building an emergency fund. A big part of your foundation for your financial health is going to be an emergency fund. So that should be the first priority. If you don't already have an emergency savings, build that up, get an emergency fund. I want to touch on that here now because it is so important. Start with $1,000. If you don't have $1,000 in cash in a savings or checking account, start there. Start with at least $1,000 and then increase that a little bit at a time. Right, we want to build up to about 3 to 6 months of savings. That's accessible. 3 to 6 months of savings in case an emergency was to happen, right? Different types of emergencies, right? We all know those urgent expenses are going to come up, whether it's your furnace goes out, your windows need to be replaced. I use those two as an example because that's what happened the first year my wife and I moved into our home. We had to replace our furnace and our windows. That was, 10 grand, which at that time was a lot to us, still would be, that we just had to spend, We had an emergency fund, so it didn't wreck our budget. If you are in maybe a more specialized field and you're in a bit more specialized industry where it may take you a little bit longer to find a new job, if you were to lose your job, then you want up to 12 months of savings. Typically don't need more than 12 months of savings in an emergency fund, because then you're missing out on potential investment returns that you could be receiving. Now, an important note on this with the emergency fund, it really does need to be in a savings account or something that's highly liquid that you will have no issues moving that money to spend, right? So different investment accounts, particularly retirement accounts, we want to be separate from the emergency savings. This is so important because I see it along the way, right, through people's retirement journeys as I'm meeting with individuals. I see people who didn't have an emergency savings when they were younger, and how that impacted their retirement savings 10, 20 years down the road. They didn't have an emergency fund that was liquid, so they went to their retirement accounts when they lost their job or whatever for that situation with their emergency came up. So they had to go to their retirement savings, deplete that or at least some of that to cover that emergency. And now they can't necessarily retire on time. They're having to push that back a year or two to make that up, essentially. So I can't stress the importance of an emergency savings enough. It is very important. So start there if you don't already have one. I want to make sure I have enough time for budgeting and debt, because that is a big part and a big stress for a lot of us nowadays. Creating a budget, it can be difficult, right? It's easy on paper, but the actual practicing and implementing of that budget can be difficult. So first of all, there are some keys that you have to a successful budget. I want to go through these very briefly. You need to be aware, right? So with your budget, you need to be aware of, yes, of course, what's coming in, but sometimes more importantly, where that money is going as it's going out. If you think it's funny that I'm saying be aware of what's coming in, but I have met with a lot of people to go through these budgeting exercises where I ask them, okay, what do you have coming in? What's your gross income? What's your net income? And they say, I don't know. What is it? Then I say, well, let's pull up a pay stub and find out, right? So you do need to be aware of what's coming in, but more importantly, what's going out and where it's going to. You need to communicate. This is particularly important if you are in a relationship. It's one of the more important things within the budget. If you are married in a relationship, you need to communicate with your partner or spouse about your financial goals. So you need to be on the same page. Doesn't necessarily mean your goals have to be the same, but you at least need to understand each other's goals and be able to help each other and be willing to help each other accomplish those goals. A good example, one of my clients on our financial planning side, I just met with them about a week ago, and they were kind of struggling to get on the same page with their finances. And so I encouraged them to have a time that they can get together a couple times a year to review together and make sure they're on the same page. They decided that Valentine's Day and their anniversary, because they're about 6 months apart, they're going to have a financial summit. So they're going to have a Valentine's Day summit and an anniversary summit where they're going to talk about their finances, talk about their goals, and get on the same page. Whatever that looks like to you, whether that's semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, what have you, make sure you're getting on the same page with your partner regarding your goals so that you can help each other stay accountable to those goals. That's the third point there, is accountability. Going back to my comments on goal setting and creating those clear, motivating goals for you, those are going to be the primary accountability partner for you to start to transition your habits and behaviors to align with your financial priorities. If your goals are not motivating enough to you, it's going to be very hard to be accountable to yourself and stick to some of the hard decisions that you may have to make. So if you're not motivated or haven't been consistent with the budget, I'll encourage you to look at those goals, make sure they're motivating, because that does make a big difference. Now, there's two types of budgeting strategies I'm going to go through. First of all, is a traditional budget. The next is going to be more of a simplified version. The traditional budget is what you typically think of when you hear the B word, budgeting, right? Which gives some people some stress, right? Your heartbeat may start beating faster when you hear that. That's where you essentially do the Dave Ramsey approach, where you look at your income for each month and say, I've got X amount of income to last this month. Every dollar is going to have a place. Every dollar is going to have a purpose, whether that's to housing, whether that's to food, whether that's to savings for midterm and short-term goals, whether it's entertainment, clothing. These categories and the percentages are going to differ based on your situation, but here are some examples of a well-structured or well-rounded balanced budget. I do typically recommend to have taxes, your retirement savings, and then anything else that's taken out of your paycheck. So health insurance, other premiums, whatever they're taken out before you get it, then you have your net income to distribute to a budget similar to this. Again, all these ranges are going to vary depending on your situation, but one I like to highlight here is this miscellaneous category. This 3% here, whatever it is for you, that you can spend on yourselves for whatever you want. I bring that up because for my wife and I, that's key to keeping us consistent with our budget, right? We have a little bit of money each month. We call it our honey money, right? That we can spend on ourselves for whatever we want. And then each month that gets replenished. I joke that we have that money to spend for ourselves, judgment free from the other. I'll be honest, there is some judgment at times, but it's all in good fun, right? So have that money, have those little tips and tricks, whatever you need to help you be consistent with your budget. So that's the typical Excel sheet style where you have your income, fixed, variable expenses, and then see what's left over that you can then reallocate. The more popular, at least nowadays, version of or strategy behind budgeting is going to be more of a simplified budget. So rather than having every dollar assigned to a spending category, you're just going to have 3 different buckets or 3 different sections where you have 50%, 30%, and 20% of your income between these 3 different buckets. You can see them there. So needs around 50%, savings, I also include debt in there, about 30%, and then wants about 20%. The reason why I included savings and debt together is because what we see is most of the time, if people accumulate more debt payments, it comes from their savings rather than their needs or wants. So we want to be extra careful with those debt payments so it doesn't eat away at your savings rates as well. But you can see that this is a much more simple version. More and more people are kind of gravitating towards this type of a strategy. And the thesis or the argument behind it is that as long as I'm saving enough, as long as I'm saving enough for my financial goals, then it doesn't necessarily matter what I do in some of these other categories, right? As long as I have enough savings to accomplish my goals in the 5-year, 10-year, 15 years, 20 plus years, then if I'm doing $200 to eating out versus $200 on gas for my car, it doesn't matter all that much. But you want to be close within these ranges to make sure you do have enough to save for those goals and that things don't get out of hand. So whichever strategy works for you, I would encourage you to find a tool to help keep you accountable and help make it easy for you to stick to that strategy and stick with it. Every one of us is going to be different, right? I like this simple Excel sheet, the zero-based style Dave Ramsey budget, but I know a lot of people that don't, and they're not able to be consistent with that. Here are a couple quick, easy budgeting tools that are quite popular nowadays. Most of these have a free version, so I'd encourage you to use the free version first to see if you like it. And then if you do, it's okay to pay a subscription for this, right? I'd rather see you pay a subscription for this than pay $10, $15, $20 a month on another streaming service that you may not necessarily need to get you closer to those goals. So pick a budgeting tool that works for you, stick with it, and be consistent. All right, just for sake of time, we'll jump into credit and debt. Go through this pretty quickly, but cover some good topics here. It is the number 1 stressor of finances. Typically, the number 2 reason on a lot of these reports around divorce comes down to finances, right? And going back to the communication key within budgeting, communication is obviously the first reason for divorce. So that kind of ties hand in hand there between communication and finances. But debt is often one of the biggest stressors within finances as well. So just some real quick realities around debt. Let's be honest. I try not to be too blunt during this section, but we use debt to buy things that we can't afford to pay cash for, which sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes that's helpful in furthering our progress towards our financial goals, like buying a house, for example. Most of us aren't able to buy a house with cash. Therefore, we have to get a mortgage. And over the long term, that is going to help us get closer to our financial priorities. But if we're financing a TV or a couch, oftentimes a lot of consumer debt, like credit card debt, that does not help us get closer to our financial priorities. So you need to be very careful with that type of loan. Other types of what we call acceptable debt, maybe a car loan, if it's a shorter term loan, right? If you start getting out past 5 years, 6, 7, or 8 year car loans, I don't consider that acceptable debt. We want to avoid that at all possible. Student loan debt is kind of a acceptable debt as well if it allows you to get a position that you can then pay back that student loan. But we have to be very careful around whenever we're getting into debt because it is a very thin line there. And the last point there, debt can, if it gets out of hand, prevent you from living the life that you really want, right? Keeping up with the Joneses, we all know that analogy there. I want to take a quick minute on credit as well before we get into some strategies around paying off debt. Credit is very important, but the most important thing about your credit is not necessarily your credit score. In fact, I have a lot of pet peeves. I won't get up on my soapbox today around credit scores, but it doesn't actually show us how well your financial wellness and financial health is. All it shows is how well you are at managing debt. But I would encourage you all to get a credit report at least once a year. So at least annually, go to one of the 3 reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion, and get a credit report. You can get a free one at least once a year. This site here is a safe site, annualcreditreport.com, to go to. It's authorized by federal law, like you see there, to give you those credit reports and to help you access those. What you will see on your credit report, like I said, is that your credit score is not the focus of the report. You'll see a lot of different things on here. I'm going to blow through them pretty quickly, but these are the different things you'll see on your credit report. Important one here is your open accounts. All right, let's say someone stole your social security number, opened up a credit card under your name, and started going crazy. You probably want to know about that. At least I would. You can see that on your credit report. If you have any unauthorized accounts out there, you can dispute that and make that right. Also, you'll see closed accounts. Yes, it is a good idea to close any accounts you're not using. Payments, this is obviously a big one. About 35% of your credit score is whether you pay on time. So obviously that's important to pay on time. And then lastly, you'll be able to see inquiries. Those are inquiries that people have made into your credit to see if you have good credit, if you're applying for a loan, for example. So I encourage you to get a credit report. And a good idea once you have that credit report is to freeze your credit. If you didn't know, you can freeze your credit. That way, if someone were to steal your personal information, they would not be able to set up an account with credit under your name. Then when you go to apply for a mortgage or a car loan, you simply unfreeze it, or thaw it, like they call it, and then you can refreeze it after you apply for that loan. It's a great option. I'd highly encourage it for everybody here to freeze your credit on a regular basis, just so you don't have to worry about anyone stealing your information. All right, so just lastly on debt, a couple different strategies to pay off debt, because most of us at some point will have some debt, right? If you don't already, that's okay. If you have debt, even if you have consumer debt, credit card debt, don't kick yourself, don't feel bad. There's always a way out. 3 different strategies here. The first 2 work, the third one doesn't. The first one here that we see is the math, also called interest rate method. This is where you line up all of your debts by interest rate and attack the highest interest rate debt first. If you're able to stay consistent, this is going to be the way to pay the least amount of interest. What this doesn't do is often help keep you motivated. That's what the momentum, this is where you line up all of your debts by balance, sometimes called the snowball strategy. Line them up by balance and then attack the smallest debt first. Then roll all of that payment into the next smallest, so on and so forth until it's all paid off. I really like the momentum approach because it helps to keep you motivated. Then when you get to that large debt, you have so much more in terms of a payment to attack that and pay it down quicker. Both of these will work. Like I said, pick one that works for you and stick with it. The last approach is unfortunately the one we see the most common, is the shotgun approach. And that's where you throw 25 bucks here, 50 bucks there, and never really make a lot of progress towards your goals. So lastly, before we end and touch on some questions here, hopefully you're able to create some financial momentum coming out of this presentation, even a little bit that you can do now, even 1%, whether that's 1% of switching your behaviors and habits to align with your financial goals, or 1% towards, your retirement savings, your future savings can do a lot down the road. You see in this example, it's very simple. It's $50 a month more now, and savings could literally be $500 a month of income down the road. That's 10xing your money essentially because of the power of compounding, because of the growth, because of that momentum that you build starting now. Another great way to build financial momentum that I want to encourage you all to do is to have some sort of financial professional in your corner, right? If that's us, we're happy to be that for you, happy to be there in your corner to help keep you accountable to your goals, to go through your financial situation, make sure you are on track for your goals and priorities. If you want to have a quick free consultation, like I said, we're more than happy to be on your team there. Scan that QR code, you'll schedule a meeting with either myself or Chad. We can go over any questions, more specific questions that we didn't get to today in this presentation. We can go over budgeting, debt pay down, but also more complex topics such as investing, tax strategies, saving for retirement, Roth versus pre-tax, anything under the sun you can think of. We're happy to help, happy to be a resource to you. I'm going to come back to this slide here in a minute, but I want to make sure you have the upcoming webinars that we're doing. We're excited for the monthly webinars this year. Next month, we'll be talking about tax planning. In April, handling market volatility with your investments. Talk about risk management, more the insurance side of financial planning. So we have some good things coming. Keep an eye out for those registrations. But as you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or Chad. Scan this QR code, schedule a meeting with us. We'd like to get to know a few of you a little bit more closely. And like I said, be a resource, be on your team there. We will send out the recording to this so you can get this QR code there, but I want to make sure you have our contact information as well. Chad, while we're just about out of time, I'm happy to stay on for a few questions if you had any good ones come through.
Yeah, first question was, can you access the annualcreditreport.com more than once a year, or is there additional ways to access your credit more than once a year? And then subsequent to that, if you close a credit card account, doesn't that have a significant issue on your credit score?
Great questions. So yes, you can access a free credit report with each of the credit reporting agencies once a year. So you can get a credit report from from Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian once a year. So you can get 3 per year for free. Obviously, if you sign up for their account and pay them, you can get as many as you want from each, but that's an additional cost. And then to the question about closing accounts or closing credit cards, yes, if you close an account that is linked to your credit, it will ding your credit score slightly, but I would not use that as a reason not to close old accounts, right? It's better just to close them, get them out of the way so you don't have to worry about them. And then within a couple months, maybe a year of good, solid financial habits, your credit score will be right back where it was, maybe even higher.
If someone has multiple accounts, should they stagger their closings of them so the score doesn't get impacted as much right away? Or is it just like a one, close the ones I don't want at the same day and move on?
I would probably say just close them all at once and move on. I don't think it'll have a big impact on the credit score over the long term if you stagger it or do it all at once. Great question.
All right, another question. This one just came in, so I want to get it answered. How do you go about freezing your account, your credit card, or your credit report?
Great question. So you will have to go to each of the 3 credit reporting agencies. So go to Experian. You will need to create an account. It's a free account. Don't let them persuade you into getting a paid account. Just do a free one. You may have to scroll down to find, the link. They try and hide it because it's free, but it just says freeze your credit. And then you'll click on that, toggle the freeze on, and then we'll have to do that for each 3. So you'll go to Experian, freeze your credit. TransUnion, freeze your credit. Equifax, freeze your credit. Because you want to do all 3, because you never know who they're going to reach out to request the credit update.
So this question says, thank you for the information. They feel as though they are way behind on saving for retirement and said that it's almost feel like they're going to be working for the rest of their life. Is there anything that they can do to essentially make it to retirement? I'm assuming that's why they wrote this in.
I love that question. And we get that all the time. And yes, there's absolutely things you can do to get back on track. Don't ever feel discouraged like you're too far behind. The best time to start is today so that you can take advantage of compounding. But if you're in that situation where you're feeling like you're behind, like you're going to have to work for forever, let us know, right? Schedule a call with us. Let me go back to our Calendly here. Schedule a call with us. We'll be able to go through your situation, get you back on track, because there's always hope. That's the most important thing. There's always hope in terms of your financial plan.
Awesome. All right, Rocky, this is the last one. And then for everyone that sent them in, we'll respond to them via email just for the sake of time. But this question centers around Social Security. I know that it wasn't something that we really touched on today. So they wanted to know, how do they factor that in to their planning? And then part of that says, is it going to be there? Should I even include it?
Great questions around Social Security. Later this year, I think over the summer, we're going to do more specific Social Security presentation there. But just real quick, yes, there will be some Social Security for you. Obviously, there's going to be some changes because it's not sustainable at the current rate. There will be some changes over the next 10 years, but there will be some Social Security for you when you get there. It just may look a little different, whether that's increased taxes, later retirement age, right? For folks like Chad and myself that have 30 years or more before we retire. But there will be some Social Security. You want to factor that in, but maybe you want to be a little more conservative. So when you're looking at your retirement income, maybe instead of projecting 30 or 40% replacement from Social Security, you only want to plan for about 20% of your income replaced by Social Security, just to be a little conservative, just in case.
Part of that question that I definitely wanted to have you answer is how much do they know they're getting? Like, is what they're asking as well.
That's a fantastic part. Thank you for pointing that out. So you can get a Social Security statement. So SSA.gov, Social Security Administration, SSA.gov, create an account, sign in, request an estimate of your benefit. Everybody can do that to see if you qualify, if you've paid in to Social Security for enough quarters, and then what the estimate benefit is going to be at each year between 62 and 70, which is when the age is to file.
So I think we're going to wrap it up on that note. And I just wanted to add that if you guys wanted to not claim Social Security, that would really help Rocky and I out in making sure that they don't have to make changes to the program. So, keep us younger generations in mind when you go. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, thank you for joining our education seminar today. It's something that we hold near and dear to us. It's helping as many people as we can. So feel free to reach out. No question is too, I guess you could say, embarrassing to ask. So feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're here to help. I appreciate you all joining. Thank you.
Thank you all. The follow-up email coming up tomorrow will include the recording and more ways to access and contact us. Awesome. See you next month.